In 1982, farmer George Mathews and his son Tom once again planted a field of corn. They had been doing this for 8 years in a row since they bought this house, along with the farm and the fertile land around it. Livestock and corn raising was a familiar business to them and brought them a good income. The planting was a success, and about 3 months later, the green stalks of corn were already towering above the ground, promising a bountiful harvest. One summer night, however, George and Tom heard strange sounds coming from the field. It was a child's laughter. Light and iridescent, it sounded closer and farther away, as if the wind were playing with it. The farmer and his son first thought it was the local children playing a joke on them. They went out on the porch and listened, but they could see nothing in the darkness. The next night, the laughter was repeated, and then again and again. It was soft, but clearly audible in the silence of the night. "It must be one of the neighbors spoiling themselves," George said, shrugging his shoulders. Tom nodded, but doubt crept into his soul. The farm was quite far from the nearest settlement, and it would not be easy for the children to get here at night. However, that all changed one evening. Mathews and Tom were sitting on the porch and admiring a good field of corn. The weather outside was perfect, with a full moon shining in the sky. This time, however, instead of laughter, they heard crying. A child's cry, pitiful and long. It sounded as if someone very small was crying for help. This time, they didn't hesitate. They took the flashlights in their hands and went deep into the cornfield. The corn stood in a thick wall, the ears rustling in the wind, but through them came the distinct sound of weeping. The men walked on, lighting their way, each step bringing them closer to the place from which the crying came. They had gone about 300 feet before a chilling horror seized them. Directly in front of them, in the middle of a cornfield, was an old children's cemetery. 5 old children's graves with headstones. Moonlight fell on the tombstones, and George was horrified to read the dates of death. May 6th, 1965. That date was the same on all the graves. How is that possible? Tom whispered. George remained silent, trying to control his trembling. He knew that in his years of living here, he had never seen or heard of any cemetery. After all, they'd ploughed this field every year for 8 years straight, and there couldn't have been anything like this here. They stood there, unable to take their eyes off the inscriptions, when the children's laughter resounded again. Now it sounded all around them. Whispers, light footsteps, shadows flickering between the corn stalks. George and Tom ran back without looking back. The 2 grown men ran in fear from the place. It was not until they reached the house that they dared to catch their breath. The next day, George approached the old-timers in the town. One of them, an old pastor, told them a terrible story. In 1965, there had been a tragedy nearby. 5 children had gone missing. They were searched for, but never found. After a few years, the rumors about them died down, and no one ever remembered again. Since that day, the farmer and his son have never heard laughter or crying. However, looking at the field of corn, they knew that still, something terrible lurked among the land, guarding the peace of its little inhabitants.